good afternoon. Good. I'll let one of the individuals get coffee, cookies, whatever they need, and then we'll get started. Okay. I'm Gail Hermam, and I have the distinct pleasure today of doing a review of the book, Mistress of the Ritz. And before I get started, I just want to take a couple of minutes to share why I'm probably not qualified to be doing this, but I'm doing it anyway. This is
Everybody said. That's totally line. How can you single person?
okay. So this is a little bit out of my normal comfort zone, but I am president of the Friends of Wood Library, which I have so far enjoyed very, very much. It's a great group, and I'm so totally impressed with everything the library does as far as reaching out in the community and making a difference for everybody in the greater Canandaigua area. Thank you. I'm also an avid Persapalooza volunteer. I've been involved with that group after the first year, and I am the purse piecing aficionado, so I'll be checking out purses. We're here today to see if there's something that might be a great donation item. No pressure, but... So that's a little bit about my background. So the first question I'd like to ask is, how many people have not read the book today? Okay. Well, hopefully I'm not going to give away any of the major plots in the story. So after today's session, I hope you'll all take the time to read the book. I found it very fascinating, and just from a historical perspective, with the Ritz and the war and all the intricacies that occurred there. But it's also a great book if you're like me, you don't have a lot of time to spend to read. So I'm one of these people. I'll read 15, 20 minutes and then I'm either asleep or I'm waiting for my next appointment, whatever it is. And it's the kind of book you can read, put down, start again, and not feel like you've got to reread something you did before. So with that being said, I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about the author, Melanie Benjamin. She writes historical fiction, and she really made her name when she wrote The Aviator's Wife, which I know a lot of people have read, and everybody found it very fascinating, and the fact that she takes a historical event and weaves a story about it. Her stories also have one other interesting thing that I noted, and they typically have women who fall in love with men who may not be the best choice for them. And this particular book follows the same plot line as you go through and read it. The Mistress of the Ritz is a captivating novel. It's based on the story of an extraordinary real-life American woman who secretly worked for the French resistance during World War II, while secretly playing hostess to the invading Germans at the iconic Hotel Ritz in Paris. And I did some research online, like we all do, and I quote from one of the book reviews that I found: "Nothing bad can happen at the Ritz. Inside its gilded walls, where every woman looks beautiful, every man appears witty. Favored guests like Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Coco Chanel, and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor walk through the famous doors to be welcomed and pampered by by Blanche Ozello and her husband Claude, the hotel director. The Ozellos are the mistress and master of the Ritz, allowing their glamour and glitz to take their minds off their troubled marriage and off the secrets they are not only keeping from their guests, but more importantly, from each other. That is until June of 1940, when the Germans marched down the Champs-Elysees. Hermann Göring, famous, I put famous in quotation marks, Nazi, and others were vetting hotels to find the Nazi headquarters, and they settled on the iconic Ritz as their headquarters. And doing some research on that that wasn't really dealt with at the book, I found it very interesting that the Germans picked this hotel because of its well-renowned standing in the world for being a place of luxury, privilege, and they took over part of the hotel. And I found it very interesting that another part of the hotel was still kept open for paying guests. I took it at the Nazis were trying to use this hotel as a way to potentially clean up their bad acts and some of the things that they were doing. So when the Germans, Nazis moved in, Blanche and Claude felt that they had to suddenly navigate a new reality, one that led to more lies and secrets. Claude and Blanche find it difficult and challenging to maintain the facade as a happily married couple who run the Ritz. Their relationship has had their moments. It was challenged when Claude's announcements to his wife that he had reserved Thursday night for his mistress, and the insistence that infidelity is a French male privilege. Very, very interesting. That's my comment.
That's one word for it.
That's for sure. Claude can be insufferable, and Blanche, over the years, has been known to desert him temporarily. So she had her escapades too, and on one of them, she befriended Lily, a young radical who goes off to fight in the Spanish Civil War before coming back to Paris to draw Blanche into the French resistance. So it's very interesting how the story kind of does some twists and turns, and how each of the character is getting involved in lies, secrets, to be able to continue to do what they're doing. And when Blanche comes back, she's now disappointed by Claude's apparent willingness to do whatever he needs to do for the Nazis, who have become the privileged guest of the Ritz-Carlton. There's a secret that, there's one secret, actually one of many, that may destroy this tempestuous marriage between the beautiful but reckless American and her very proper French husband. For the order to survive and strike a blow against the Nazi guest, Blanche and Claude must spin a web of deceit and lies that ensnares everyone and everything they cherish. And I don't want to get into a lot of those secrets, because then you will have no motivation to read the book. But there is one secret that is shared between Blanche and Claude alone, and that secret is the one in the end that threatens to imperil both their lives and possibly bring down the legendary Ritz-Carlton itself. So that's kind of the overview that I want to give you. Hopefully it's enough to whet your appetite that you'll want to go out, get the book, and say, I really want to know some of the twists and turns in the story. What I found very interesting about this novel was the fact that the author didn't refuse to, or didn't make either Claude or Blanche as a victim or a victimizer. Each one of them had the various characteristics. Sometimes they were the victim, sometimes they were the victimizer. But what I found interesting is both characters grow during the course of the story. And once again, without giving away a lot, I found that Blanche gradually discovers her own heroism, which is a plus for this American woman who's living in Paris and living with the rules of French life. And her husband Claude, who was somewhat of a vain, willful individual, and at the end he's transformed into I'm going to say a more human character that actually has some self-doubt, like I think most people do. Each character kind of flip-flops with where they started and where they end up at the end of the story. This book, Mistress of the Ritz, is based on true events, but the author was able to make a story that's a tale of suspense wrapped in a love story. It's the inspiring story of a woman and man who discover the best in each other amid the turbulence of war. I think that sums up the book in a nice overview. It gives people a feel of what's there, and I guarantee if you read the book, you'll love some of the twists and turns and some of the things that happen to the character, how they develop, how they react, and it's almost like you're with each character as they're going through their growing pains and finally reaching the conclusion of the book. So with that being said, I'd like to take questions right at the moment if anybody has anything there. Go right ahead, Trixie.
I'm just a little confused. Blanche and Claude are the characters in the book, not
Yes.
people that actually worked at the Ritz.
They are characters in the book. Blanche was an American who came to Paris,
Right.
so it's true people, but she's putting it in the setting of the Ritz-Carlton and what's happening during the war.
Okay, so the Ritz-Carlton, there wasn't a couple similar to this, or who ran the Ritz-Carlton?
Yes,
Claude did.
Claude did. He was the
There really
director.
was a person
Yes.
named Claude, a real life person.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. Peter.
Gail, is there much war-related violence in the book?
No. There's one incident of Claude. He was out in the field, and due to a fluke circumstance, the rest of his army, the army group he was with, was killed. He happened to be at the right place at the wrong time, and that's how he survived. And it's one of these things that he was very embarrassed about, and didn't want to share with people how he was able to survive this attack. Yes?
Does the author tell you the name of the person that it actually in history did some of this besides Claude? So, because I usually look it up and see, in the back of the book sometimes they do that.
He and Blanche were real people. They are basically they put this setting together, and like any historical, novel, they take a historical event and somewhat, add embellishments to make a good story.
So you can Google Blanche and Claude, put your last
Yeah.
name, and find out what really happened.
Yeah, and there's not a lot about them, that's the interesting part, because I did that, and there's not a lot of information, and when this story was written, it was a way to bring out what these two individuals did. Yes?
I thought that the author's note at the back, I wish I had read at the front.
Oh.
Because it really explained a lot of the questions
Yes.
here. That there have been several books written about them in their situation. But, and then so she went deeper and
Yes.
as far as creating more, fiction about what was going on, but, I would have appreciated that at the beginning. Because it doesn't take away from the story, but it does answer questions.
I agree with what you're saying, because when I got done and I read that, I was like, wow,
Yeah,
really?
because I really thought I was reading, like historical fiction,
Mm-hmm.
until I was, way into there, and then I think I Googled her, or Googled something, and,
Yeah.
but no, these people are real,
Mhm.
so,
Yeah.
That's why I was confused.
yeah.
Yes.
A couple, either last year or the year before, we had a book review, and I think, I'm trying to remember the title, but I think it was The Lilac Lady.
Oh, yeah, oh, there's a lot of those. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was an American who was in Paris, and I don't think she was working for the French resistance, but she was taking women from Poland who were trying to escape.
Oh, I know the book.
Yes,
The Lilac Girls.
Yeah.
I know the book you're referring to, yes.
Is this at all, did you read that?
I did read that book.
There's a lot of concentration camp in that
Yeah.
book.
Yes,
Yeah, this
Yeah.
book, when you mentioned the World War II, I mean, it's in World War II,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
it's nothing,
it's
Like-
far removed from the
Yeah.
actual battle.
nothing super disturbing.
Well, except the stories of
Well,
people who were
yeah.
coming to America to live in
But I mean, in this book, when you compare it to other books that deal with World War II, in the historical fiction or anything, there's a lot of other books I've read that are way more disturbing, I would say,
Yeah.
than what they talk about in this book.
Yeah, this is kind of, you're involved in the war, but you're dealing with it more from interactions of people who might not necessarily be right in the throes of battle. And so, Paris was occupied, but there wasn't, like I think of battle that, somebody is shooting me immediately, that kind of thing. There's a lot of going back and forth, in the book.
Well, one thing that I liked about the book was the fact that, in my mind, and from, my knowledge of the occupation of Paris, that if you look at old newsreels, it's like happening, I think, on one day, they're all coming in with the tanks and the marching, and that was my vision of kind of how it happened. But in this book, it says slow, insidious, they're friends, these people who are usually here, are gone, no one hears from them. And then a couple more people are gone. And then Blanche is out doing her thing, and, she sees children with the little stars, and,
Yes.
I mean, it's like more this creep, of it happening little by little. And it was totally changed my whole view of how it.
That's very interesting when you mention that, because it's not like what we think of battle today, like you look at the invasion of Ukraine, and all of a sudden, Ukraine's invaded, or when we went into Iraq. This was almost a slow, steady, endeavor that was going on, and it was trying to, the Germans were trying to ingrain themselves in France, and as I said, I believe they chose the Ritz because of what the Ritz represents. It's this glamorous hotel. It's where anybody who's anybody goes to the Ritz. And you look at some of the people that were there, specifically Coco Chanel.
Yes.
And I found that interesting because there's then since been rumors that Coco Chanel was actually a sympathizer to the Nazis. So there's definitely twists and turns as far as how the author lays out the story that she's telling us in this book. Yes?
Does the author, involve actual people that were involved with the French Resistance? Because I had read a book about Virginia Hall, who was an American, and, from what I read, she was credited with like really getting the French Resistance going. She had an amputation in her wooden leg, so they never suspected her. And, so I'm wondering, does she do that? Does she like bring in real people that were in the French Resistance in the story?
No, or to the best of my knowledge, no. Based on, she had different characters, but I'm guessing those characters were made up. Yeah, but she did bring in, as I said, like Coco Chanel, Ernest Hemingway, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and kind of had those folks going through. And it was interesting because many of them befriended the Nazis because they wanted to, I guess, kind of have your cake and eat it too. So I found that very interesting, some of these, famous, notable people, and suddenly they're showing sympathies to the Nazis. But who am I to judge? Yes?
So did the Germans actually go to the Ritz? That's a true fact, and have
Yes,
rooms there or an office or something? That's true.
that is true. Based on how the book laid it out, there's like two parts of the Ritz, and the Nazis took over the high-end portion of the Ritz, and then the nice part. And then people could stay at the Ritz, but they weren't in some of these well-appointed rooms that you think about when you hear Ritz-Carlton. And to that point, I really felt the hotel almost was a character in itself. And for anyone who's read the book, I'd love to hear your feedback, but I felt like the hotel was a character who was playing an important part in telling the story, the glitz and glamour versus the raw reality of what was really happening in the world, and specifically in the world of the Ritz. Any feedback on that?
It describes it as nothing bad happens in the Ritz. The Ritz is gonna protect you, it's gonna make you look better, it's gonna make you happier. So it kind of takes on that persona.
Good. Any other questions? If not, I've got some discussion questions that I pulled from the author, Melanie Benjamin, and we can go through a few of those, but I don't want to cut anyone off before we start that portion.
Just a comment.
Mhm.
Everything you're saying makes this sound like, and this is not a negative comment. I watch a lot of old movies. This sounds like a late 1940s black and white film, basically.
That's a good analogy. Yes.
It could do it, sure. Yeah, it could be a play that happens within just the Ritz too.
Mhm. So it's interesting you talked about something happening just within the Ritz, and the fact that basically the book was pretty much set in one location for the bulk of the story. How do people feel about that? Did that make it easier to understand the story and what was going on, or would it have been easier to have things kind of spread around in different locations?
would make a good point for the person who said that Ritz was one of the characters in the story.
Mhm.
Well, I liked how they went, each chapter, it was Claude, 1941, Blanche, 1944. I mean, it kept going back and forth with, and always centrally, mostly around the Ritz. I thought it was good. It was easy to read.
Well, that's interesting, because that was one of the discussion questions
Oh, is
of, so thank you, Lynn, for bringing that one up. And the question was, how do people feel about that? Was it easier to understand each perspective when you got a focus in each chapter? Or do you think it would have flowed better if you had more interaction between the two?
I don't know, I got to a certain point and I was like, okay, I gotta finish this. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I liked the way she wrote it, and, yeah.
Good. So, one of the questions I would ask for the folks who've read it, what was your overall opinion of Blanche? What did you think of her? Did you think she was a sympathetic character? Did you think she was, somebody who, did things that were less than truthful, which she did, but that's neither here nor there. How do you think the imprisonment affected her, and how that may have changed her as a character going forth in the novel?
We're gonna ruin.
That's right, I said I want to make sure you guys want to read this. So.
She was growing up throughout the whole, becoming her own person, starting out at one point and then evolving to that point
Mm-hmm.
without giving away
Yeah.
everything.
She starts out as a flapper from America, going to France, and it's just a whole different personality type, and she meets with Claude, he certainly isn't, that way.
So let's segue over to our friend Claude. What do people think about Claude as far as being a good and loving husband to Blanche?
Again, without giving anything away, I think he, I was gonna say with Blanche, I think she grew a lot in this book. I mean, can you imagine your husband saying to you, well, you mentioned this part, right?
Yeah.
Thursday night, And
It's a
then
right
we're
of
not
being
gonna ruin
married.
it for people, then you kind of, as you read on, understand what was going on there. But then Blanche in her own right also was like, appearing as though she's partying and everything, and kind of gave it back to her husband. Again, I'm not gonna ruin anything, because the real truth about that will come out too, but.
Well, they were certainly an interesting set of characters. They were very diverse, very different. Both had a lot of they were steeped in how they grew up and where they grew up. Blanche being an American flapper, and going overseas at a very young age, and Claude being somewhat of a very, I guess, distinguished. Appearances need to be kept, and one always did the right thing, no matter how you felt and what you thought. You had the appearance that you needed to keep up. So, and I don't know if I should ask this question because I don't want to give anything away. So for you folks who've read it, you can tell me whether this is a yes or a no. How do people feel about the way Claude dealt with the German Nazi officers and just some of the regular infantry infantry folks, that kind of thing, while they were at the Ritz. Do you think he did the right thing? Do you think that he went overboard with what he was trying to do? I'd love some comments and thoughts on how people feel about that.
And did he have a choice?
That's a good question.
Was he at the hotel, like, had he been there before he married Blanche?
Yes,
So she
Yeah.
married into it. but
yes,
He had,
Well, he was actually at a different.
yes, he started,
Declared.
yeah.
okay.
and then he wormed his way into the Ritz.
Which made it very,
Yes,
made it very valuable to him. So
Mhm.
that's why he acted the way he did towards the Germans, because he wasn't gonna lose.
And he tried to find the middle way between
He did.
Mhm.
saving Ritz himself, but also keeping the enemy quiet.
Mhm. And how do you think he did with keeping the enemy quiet?
By talking to them, that's what he did,
Mhm.
and that's what fit his job as manager.
Mhm. So I then would just toss the thought out, the ethical dilemma that he must have faced. If you are doing something because of your job and your position, and you know it's probably not the right thing to do, how do you reconcile your actions against what's here right in your heart? And I think about that often, and I'm sure everybody here has had situations that you say, do I stand up for what I believe, or do I just do what I need to do because I'm really not doing anything that bad? We all have ways of justifying our actions and decisions. I know I do, so I'm assuming everybody else is somewhat in the same mindset as I am with that.
And what did other occupied French people think about Claude?
That's an interesting question.
Did you get any of that?
No.
Did the book end before the Germans left France?
Yes, no, the book ended after they had left, and then there was an epilogue to the story with what ultimately happened. And I can't tell you that
After
because
they had left?
after,
Yes.
yes,
Blanche and Claude had left, or the Germans?
after the Germans had left. So are you gonna read the book?
This started at 500 pages, so.
It's not 500 pages.
No, but the one that I started.
Oh, well, look at it this way, you can have this one on the back burner, I'll even give you my copy because I'm done. So, and otherwise it would be going in the book, I'm sorry, Peter, I'm not gonna donate this book to the book sale because I'm gonna give it to Trixie so she can read it. And then maybe she'll donate it. So, are there any other questions or comments or thoughts, about the book? Okay, well, I guess you're gonna get out early today. I really am glad I had this opportunity to share a little bit about the book, some of my thoughts, and more importantly, it was great to be with a group of people who are obviously interested in different kinds of books, and I think it's wonderful that there's this opportunity at Wood Library to share and let people know what's going on with books, and hopefully you'll find this a opportunity to think not only about the book, but just a little bit about human nature and how we react based on the circumstances we're given in life. Thanks so much.